people assume, they hear this word biodegradable and it sounds all kind of nature friendly and cuddly and it's going to disappear into nature and everything's going to be wonderful. And the fact that it doesn't happen like that at all is a very hard myth to dispel.
Welcome back to The Responsible Edge, the podcast exploring how to balance profit with purpose in an increasingly complex world. I'm Charlie Martin, your host, founder of TrueMark, and our article this week is titled The Truth, Why Compostable Packaging is Unsustainable, which exposes why compostables often fail in the real world. And our guest today, I'm absolutely thrilled to say, is Clare Brass, co-founder and chief product officer at Moree, longtime design educator and one of the UK's most credible voices on circular packaging and reuse. Clare, it's an absolute thrill to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time.
Well, it's really, really great to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Charlie. I have to say I'm not an expert at all on podcasts, so please bear with me. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster for me for sure.
Well, Clare, as I'm sure most of our regular listeners and viewers will suggest, I'm no expert on podcasting either. So that makes two of us. We'll have to be gentle with each other as we go through the conversation today. But yes, thank you so much for giving up some of your time. Now, I very briefly introduced Moree and your involvement with the organization and the work that you do at the moment. For those listeners and viewers who are immediately jumping over to LinkedIn now, finding your profile and trying to find out more, save them the clicks. Perhaps just give a sort of a brief overview as to what your work entails at the moment.
So my work at Moree is all about how can we make reusable packaging actually work in the real world. And it's been quite an interesting and long journey, but we've ended up creating a reusable packaging system for the coffee sector. And it's quite straightforward. We have a couple of products, maybe 3 products connected to the actual use of transporting coffee. We only work with B2B coffee, so our clients selling their coffee to HoReCa sector, that's hotels, restaurants, cafes, office buildings, etc. And we also have a tracking platform which enables our clients to know exactly where each unit of packaging is at any given time and how long it's been there. And so they always get it back. So this is kind of the really important thing about reusable packaging is you have to have a way of tracking it and getting it back.
Indeed, and you're going to be hopefully. I mean, the expertise that are coming through on all things reuse and circularity on this. I'm going to be holding on to your coattails slightly with some of these questions, Clare. So apologies for that already. But just give us again. I'm sure now all of our listeners and viewers are jumping over to the Moree website and thinking, I need to understand more about these products. So again, let's save them the clicks. Just explain to us like exactly how the products work and what they deliver.
So if you imagine that our clients are regularly sending out on a weekly basis 30, 40, 50 kilos of coffee to a particular cafe. So they may have 100 customers of their own, and each customer is receiving, huge quantities of coffee every week. And that would mean if they're sending out 50 kilos of coffee a week, those 1 kilo bags are going to last they're going to stay there for 1 day or 2 days or maximum a week. Before they end up in the bin. So it's an incredibly short turnaround. And that packaging is quite expensive. So by providing them with a reusable 5 kilo vessel, which then gets returned, we are saving them not only an enormous amount of waste, but also CO2. And above all, we're saving them quite a lot of money. So they're saving money on their packaging costs, which is, we have discovered on our journey is quite important. I mean, nobody is going to adopt a reusable packaging system that is going to cost them and their customers more. So the financial aspect is quite important.
So when you transitioned from or asked these organizations to transition from a 1 kilo packaging solution to a 5 kilo packaging solution, was that adopted sort of very easily, if you like, within those organizations? Or was there some resistance to, no, we prefer the flexibility that comes with a 1 kilo package? Was there a degree of having to sort of get people to rethink the way that they viewed their packaging and delivery of their product?
Not really, because actually, just to clarify, so my background is as a designer. I'm a product design engineer, and basically a lot of what we do is not designing something and then telling the client this is what it is, but really understanding what our clients do and how we can best serve them before we design anything. So even with a product in our hands, we spend a lot of time talking to our clients, watching them, watching their customers, seeing what they do and what they do that they may not even think to explain to us, that they don't think it's important, but they do things that we think, oh, that's really interesting. We noticed that some of our coffee customers are very, very, many of them are very concerned about the environment. In fact, they go to enormous lengths to specify on their websites, or their whole ethos is based on the care they take with their farmers and fair trade and organic coffee, or coffee that is grown in very, very particular locations. And, in fact, specialty coffee in particular, it's special because of a flavor grading. So when experts in coffee grade coffee, there's I think it's in it's either 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. I actually can't remember. A grading system. Specialty coffee has to be over a certain number, and everything else is below. So when you really taste specialty coffee, you really do notice the difference. Anyway, so our customers are very keen on the environment, but up until now, they haven't really had any way of making their packaging sustainable. The only thing they've been able to do is use reusable buckets. So lots of our customers have got this situation where they have these plastic buckets that they fill with coffee, put the lid on, send out to their customer, and then hope they get those buckets back while paying an enormous amount of money to couriers to actually get them back. And some of them say the courier's too expensive, we'll use the buckets, but our market is just going to be in this 4-mile radius from our roastery, because we can't send them out any further because we can't get them back without costing us a fortune. So this was where we really started. And what we realized was, we tried carrying buckets of coffee on a bicycle, to see how difficult is this. You can get you can just about get 2 5-kilo buckets on 2 bicycle panniers. Whereas if you've got them in a packaging which is a bit softer, first of all, you can carry more. But second of all, when it's empty, is basically you're not carrying around all that air. So one of our real design items on our brief was it has to be flexible. Otherwise it's not going to work. So the difference between what we do and what they currently do is our packaging is reusable, but it's cheap to get back. Or let's say it's viable to get back.
Which ultimately addresses that kind of convenience question, but equally that commerce question as well, regarding how this packaging sort of lands in terms of resolving some of the problems at play for reuse in the sector. Claire, super interesting. I feel like we could do a whole different show on Moree, and we could just go into all things what you guys are doing. But obviously we'll link to the website. People can go and check it out and find out more about the solutions that you guys have developed. For now, I want to move forward to this week's article and get your view on this. So would you mind just start by introducing the article, perhaps just summarizing what's in it, and then I'll ask you sort of to pick out whatever you thought was most interesting in the piece.
Okay, sure. So the article in question is called "The Truth: Why Compostable Packaging is Unsustainable." And this article I found really interesting. It's published by a group called Reusable, which is seems like an American company. It seems, from what I've read on their website, that company is selling reusable packaging solutions to universities and business campuses. Super interesting. And I really enjoyed reading this article because this position that they take is one that is not the opinion of the general public or people we know, even businesses, even experts don't have this perception of biodegradable packaging or compostable packaging being a problem. So it was like, I really wish I'd written that article. It's really well written. It's really simple to read. It covers kind of all the main challenges and problems with compostable packaging. And so I was quite cross that someone else had got there before me, really. I think we should have written it on our website. So yeah, it was a very, very good article.
I mean, it was, I mean, when I read it, and somebody who doesn't know a huge amount obviously about the packaging space, if you like, it was scathing, really, in terms of compostable packaging. And I mean, it was just sort of every paragraph after paragraph, it was another new thing of, oh my goodness, even when you have the right kind of combustible packaging systems in place, it's still incredibly energy intensive and water intensive, etc., and ultimately doesn't realize the kind of positive outcomes that we're looking to achieve. And that's before you even, that's when you get to the point where you've got the kind of infrastructure in place, which we don't. So we have all the other problems associated with recycling and even landfill and the impact that compostable packaging has there. So I have to admit, I read the whole article and I thought, my goodness, combustible packaging is just on its knees. I mean, this is complete fabrication when we position it as something that's environmentally friendly and an improvement. Is that your view of compostable packaging as well?
Absolutely. I this is something that drives me nuts when people always assume that the most sustainable thing they can do is switch their packaging from plastic single-use packaging to a compostable alternative. I've always said as well, I mean, it doesn't only count for this thing, but very often if you switch one material for another material, you're just putting the problem somewhere else. And this is very much the case with compostables. The other problem with compostables, or biodegradable, probably is even a worse term, because people assume, they hear this word biodegradable and it sounds all kind of nature friendly and cuddly and, oh, it's going to disappear into nature and everything's going to be wonderful. And the fact that it doesn't happen like that at all is a very hard myth to dispel. And I find it endlessly frustrating that, you know, companies will be switching their single-use packaging for another kind of single-use packaging.
And Claire, is that because it's that uncomfortable truth that organizations don't want to address? Like, ultimately, it's no, if the general consensus is that biodegradable compostable packaging is a good thing, then between now and the time when it really is dispelled that it's not, we still get to position ourselves as conveniently as possible as doing the right thing. Am I being too...
No, that is spot on, but there is another little elephant in the room, or maybe it's a big elephant in the room, actually.
We've got different types of elephants all over the place here today, you know.
Well, it's very, very difficult to do this. So if you really understand all of the drawbacks of compostable and what it does to your numbers, if you really deeply understand that, then you've got to find a system that avoids compostables and means you have to find a reuse system, and it's very, very hard to get that right as well. It's very hard to implement it. It's very hard to find systems on the market that work really well. You may have to change your own infrastructure internally if you're adopting some reusable systems. So yeah, it's really complicated, and actually it's much easier to say, oh, we'll just do compostable, because everyone will think that's fine anyway.
And that's so just kick the can down the road and just hope that, you know, for now it's too difficult to think about how we could adopt a reuse system. So we'll go down the compostable route, and for at least for now we'll get away with it, because the general consensus is that it's an improvement upon single use and plastics, etc. So exactly. That's the position.
That is the position. Then there's another rather uncomfortable position. Currently, if you use single-use packaging, you know that you're going to buy a certain amount of that packaging every 6 months. You're going to place an order and you're going to get that packaging arrive. It's quite simple. You just keep on reordering it and it keeps on arriving. But with the reusable packaging, it is more difficult because you are going to have a higher upfront cost. Now, we can do all the maths for our customers, and the maths looks really good for our customers, that we can say, we can work out what their current packaging is, what it's made of, how big is it, what's the capacity of it, how often they're sending out orders to their customers. And with that information, we can tell them exactly how much CO2 they're going to save and exactly how much waste and how much money they're going to save. Over 5 years, we save most of our customers about 50% of their packaging costs.
Wow.
But the upfront cost is significant. So even if it is in a year, they're already breaking even. So the first year they break even. After that, every time they use our packaging, they're not buying packaging at all. But still, for some of our clients, they see that upfront cost as a high cost. And they also see, some of them, are worried about how do we make the switch. So we generally don't encourage our customers to just put away their single use and adopt our packaging. We encourage them to start with one client, and when they're familiar with it and they understand how to use it, and they're comfortable with it, and their customers are comfortable with it, because that is slightly another problem as well. Their customers need to play the game.
Sorry, let me jump in on that, because I think that's something that's been sort of plaguing me a little bit with this, is that in that scenario, yes, upfront cost, yes, sort of adoption internally for us as your customer, if you like, in terms of the way that we need to change the way that we're working. But presumably the reuse systems rely on our customers adopting and buying into this. And if they don't, and if they're not reliable in their use of the reuse system, there's a possibility that we as the original producer here are going to find ourselves with no packaging. And if we're in a no packaging situation, we're in serious trouble. Is that the sort of extrapolated concern of these organizations?
That is the extrapolated concern, although our packaging is designed so that you always know where it is. And we also provide our clients with a template agreement. So we suggest them start with a customer, a cafe or a hotel or a corporate business that is really, really driven by sustainability values.
Yeah.
If you have that on the other end, you can educate them and they will comply. Don't start with a customer who's like, always sending your buckets back broken or damaged or full of cigarette butts, because probably they're not the right customers to start with. And I think the thing with reusables is we do need a societal shift, but you can't make a societal shift in one go. You have to do it in steps. So what we do is try to make it as easy as possible for our clients to convince their customers to join in and do this with them. And so far that's worked really well. So basically we send them this template agreement, and they can agree together with their customers how the agreement works. So the first month, we're not going to charge you, we're not going to penalize you for getting it wrong, but after the first month, and they can say the first month or the first week or the first year if they want, after that, between, let's say, 1 month and 3 months, we'll charge you 50% of the replacement cost of the bag. And after that, if you damage it or lose it, then we will charge you the full cost. So they both have to agree that before they start. We don't have to. We suggest that they make that agreement with their customer. So far, we haven't had anyone in 2 years come back and say they've lost packaging or that their clients are not playing ball with them. So it's working.
And that is so good to hear. And does this also, I'm going to get slightly technical with things here, and I've misunderstood things, then apologies, but is this where your tracking software app becomes so important? Because I, as your customer, need to be able to track these things in order to determine whether or not we are going to have a packaging shortfall, which exactly. I then require to replace. And is that why that tracking is so important? So that I don't have to just find myself in a situation where I'm thinking, my goodness, we're just completely out of packaging. We can charge our clients, the damaged or the lack of the delivery of the packaging back to us sort of fee. But if I've got no packaging, then I'm sort of stuck in the mud. The app allows me to track and plan for those gaps.
Exactly. No, that you've put your finger on it, actually. So our back-end system allows you, as if you're one of our clients, you can see how many bags you own altogether, how many you've got currently in stock, and which clients have got all the rest and how long they've had them. So you can manage it very easily. So it does give you a very strong idea. Every time you open the app and you see the dashboard, you can see, okay, I've got enough stock to keep going for now. Or, oh goodness, I'm running a bit low on stock. Let's have a look and see who's had my packaging more than a week. And so just get in touch with them and say, time to send it back, mate.
I want to come back to you made a point just before about like, this is a big shift. I think, it's a societal shift really in the way that we view packaging. And we've maybe gone through that kind of phase, if you like, of thinking, well, what we need to do is address the materials that ultimately we use to deliver our packaging. And the sort of uncomfortable truth for a lot of us that we're just waking up to, that the article does a really good job of presenting, is that no, it's not about the materials. It's about the fact that you're creating single-use forms of packaging in any material makeup. What we need to do is start thinking about reuse. Obviously, you coming on the Responsible Edge podcast has got to be part of this, but like, what else needs to happen to get that sort of level of clarity and understanding within both society and within the commercial world that compostable and biodegradable packaging is just not acceptable and we need to find a new solution?
It's a really interesting question, because I think things need to change at lots of levels. I mean, the first thing is that gesture that we all know. I haven't got a convenient piece of packaging in front of me, but you open something and then you just toss it in the bin. And that gesture of putting something in the bin, or even, if you're very, very conscientious, you put it in the recycling bin. Mm-hmm. Recycling from a circular economy point of view, this is going to be really contentious, but recycling is probably the worst thing you can do in a circular economy. So that's kind of...
I think we just have our headline. I think we just have our... thank you very much, Claire. Please explain. I mean, my very, very ill-informed view would be that statement doesn't make sense. Why? Surely, if we're recycling, then ultimately materials are going back into the system and can be reused in a way. So why is that not the case?
Yeah, you'd think that was the case. But actually, if you think about it, we have been recycling since the 1950s, maybe the 60s, when recycling started. The most we've ever been able to recycle in this country, I mean, our recycling rates are currently around 46, I think, or 48%. But that is the amount of, let's call it waste, because for me, it's still pretty much waste. That's the amount of waste that we as consumers put into our recycling bins. That's around 48%. That doesn't mean that 48% of everything that we produce in terms of packaging gets recycled and turned into a new product, because the economic model of our recycling system is a disaster. It doesn't work economically. It doesn't work economically because there's no real... The value of that recyclate is really low. It doesn't stack up economically. So it's always a cost. And this means, if you think about it, if you open the... I don't know, I do this all the time, which is like, I'm a bit of a nerd about the recycling bins. I'll go outside my flat and I'll open the lid of those big recycling wheelie bins and look inside and start taking out recycling stuff that people have put in there that they think is recyclable that isn't, right? So this is the first challenge. People will they'll put their recycling in a plastic bag in the bucket. You can't recycle polythene, soft polythene. Any soft plastic materials has to be taken to your Tesco's, which may be a half an hour bus ride away to get to your nearest mega store that has these recycling facility for their carrier bags. So you can't put those bags in a recycling bin. And if you do, and many other materials as well, people will put all kinds of things in the recycling bin, like bits of wood, because they think surely wood is recyclable, right? So they'll put bits of wood or, bits of furniture in there. Polystyrene's big bugbear of mine. I cannot bear polystyrene, and it always ends up in the recycling. So I don't spend a huge amount of my week doing this, but I will go and have a little look every now and again inside the bin and just pick out all the things, and it makes me very angry. Like, people don't get it. Anyway, my particular habit of doing that is pretty irrelevant. The fact is,
Claire, I was just going to say on that, like, obviously, if anybody sees Claire out in the wild there, diving into recycling bins, do not be alarmed. Do not think that Claire needs some help or support in it. She's doing some proper research into all things recycled. Well, let me just ask you a question on this, though, Claire. So you've described there that it's almost the lack of understanding that we as the individuals deciding what is recyclable and what's not is sort of contaminating, if you like, the input into our recycling system. So we ultimately end up with things that aren't recyclable in there. Is that the problem? Is that why our recycling system doesn't work?
No, that's one of the reasons why it doesn't work. So here's another big one, which is also mentioned in this fantastic article that we've mentioned. And the truth about one of the truths about why compostable packaging doesn't work is, as you as a consumer, you get your, I don't know, your fancy organic something or other in a pouch that is, let's say it says compostable. And when you look at it, the material often looks very, very similar to a PET container. So you could have these two containers. Yeah, they'll have some symbol underneath stamped into the mold of the box, which will give you a number. And if you know what that number is, you'll know that number means compostable, and you shouldn't put it in the recycling. Sometimes that's really illegible, or people just don't look. It looks the same. I'll put it in the recycling bin. If that is a compostable pot that goes in the recycling bin, it can contaminate an entire batch of recycling, and everything has to go to landfill because it's got one bit of compostable packaging in it. So this is another problem, very, very difficult to deal with, because it is about what people understand and how well it's communicated and the facility they have to actually put it in the right place. I live in a flat. We don't have a bin for green waste. We have recycling and we have main waste. And if people have to choose, they're always going to think that a recycling bin's got to be the better place than the bin. So that's another problem. But the main problem from a circular economy perspective is that all of those materials, let's say there was no contamination in that bin at all, and they were all correctly put in the bin. We've got thousands of types of plastics, and we've spent decades refining and designing and developing those specific materials for a very specific use. And the bin is full of many, many different types of materials. But there is a degree of separation. They'll separate plastic from paper, for example, or glass will get separated out through a mechanical process. But then you've got all of these plastics will get chopped up into little pieces and made into a new material. And that material has no specific mechanical property at all. Probably you can do some things with it. You can mold it into a new kind of solid, rigid box, for example. And then after that, every time that goes in the recycling, the quality of that is also degrading. It's degrading the entire batch again. So it's very interesting. In Europe, they've just introduced new legislation in the last 12 months, really, which is specifying that all packaging has to have 30% recycled content in it. If that was the case, and imagine that 30% is keeping on going round and round, the quality of that 30% is always going to be lower and lower. So we like, as consumers, to have our shampoo in a transparent bottle. When the bottle becomes a little bit murky or it's got some coloured streaks in it, we might think, well, I'm not buying that. That looks horrible. Because we've been educated by the whole industrial and retail system to want things in perfectly clear, transparent bottles. We think if it's got a mark on it, it must be dirty. So this is going to come back to bite the industry, and I don't know how they're going to cope with they have to start educating their customers.
Do you know what we've mentioned elephants during this conversation? I'm going to ask you what I think is the biggest elephant in the room when it comes to the whole debate for me. And that is that it's really a matter of consumption. It's the whole idea that there is a whole packaging industry at the moment that is built upon the mechanism of single use and of buying more and of, as you say, expectations being that the packaging is absolutely perfect, that there's no cracks, delineations, abrasions, etc. with it. It needs to be perfect. With all of those expectations and with that industry at play, this is a really, really big and hard battle to win. How are we going to go from where we are now to where we need to be?
I wish I had the answer to that question, but I do think that for us as a business, our real goal, at least for now, is to demonstrate that reuse can work. And that means forget the general public. We started out at a much broader level. Now we've got to a point where we understood we need to do this with businesses where you have a degree of control over, what people do with the packaging. And there's also kind of a financial control, if you like, as well. So first step, let's demonstrate that it is possible and that we can make it work in one sector. Then we can start going outwards. And what our belief is that in the meantime, there will start to be this societal shift, and people, general public people, will maybe become a little bit more sensitive to the requirements and maybe need to be trained differently themselves. Like, we have to have systems in place which are easy enough for everyone to understand. Currently, they're not easy at all. But I think the elephant in the room, well, there are two. One is the packaging industry is a massive, massive commercial thing. Like, you can't just switch it off. That's because there's a lot of interest in not switching it off, obviously. And the second thing is that if you think about it from a circular perspective, there is no way, as we have a growing population in the world and we have a growing middle class, there's no way that recycling is ever going to keep pace with the rate at which we are increasingly using single-use packaging. And the only way that we're going to combat all of these challenges that this packaging waste is creating is by turning off the tap. We have to turn off the tap. It's like, I used to have this slide in a presentation where I'd show a bathtub, with the tap running, and then someone with a teaspoon sort of trying to bail out the bathwater to stop it overflowing. You just have to turn the tap off. And that is the elephant in the room. And making it work is very difficult on so many levels that you have to understand what isn't making it work in order to start making it work.
Well, and that's why from this conversation, I'm so and to keep things on a positive keel, I'm so encouraged that you are doing this work, because as you say, we can have examples created of showing where reuse really can work, then presumably that's going to allow you, with Moree to work with more clients to get them to adopt this approach. And then ultimately, I suppose the ultimate implication of this for the packaging industry, the traditional packaging industry, is they look at the work that you're doing and their business models start shifting, whereby perhaps they look at, well, we're going to create something great that you buy once, and then it's really about the systems that we help organizations implement in order to track and enable the reuse function. Is that the ultimate goal here? If you were to look back at the end of all of this, would that look like success to you?
Well, I'm not sure that's going to happen. I mean, it's a lovely picture you're painting, but actually the problem is, imagine that you're a company that has got 1,000 employees and your whole business is built. I mean, God, there are some companies that are not bigger than that, but let's just say you're a small packaging company, you've got 1,000 employees. Your whole business model and your whole operational model and your employment structure and everything you do is based on the principle of selling units of packaging. That's what your business does. If you ask them to say, okay, we're not going to do that anymore, we're going to switch to reusables, I think they would put themselves out of business. What I think will happen, we sometimes use this lifeboat metaphor, which doesn't really work at the scale we're working at now, but having worked for many years with some big companies, it is an interesting phenomenon. So a big company, let's say, those are enormous efforts. They spend millions of pounds every year developing the most sustainable packaging. It's got thinner walls, it's got some recycled content, blah, blah, blah. They spend millions every year. But really, as their markets grow, they're still actually producing the same amount of plastic, or probably even more. So they can't really switch. But what they can do, we call that the lifeboat approach, is they can do something surreptitiously on the side. They can afford to set up a company which does it a bit differently. Nobody has to know that it is actually their company. They can try doing that, and then they can do that experimentation kind of on the side without anyone noticing and without disrupting their current business. Because if you disrupt their current business, you basically put hundreds of thousands of people out of a job and they go bankrupt, and with all the, everything else. So you can't do it that way. They big businesses, they have to find a way of doing that and testing it without it impacting on their business.
But then again, it's good. I mean, again, thank you for bringing me back down to earth a little bit, Claire, and throwing cold water on me, which was important. It needs to be done. I'm far too optimistic at times, but but again, it's about the use case. It's about whatever way it needs to be done. Let's just see more use cases of reuse packaging working,
yes.
and then that begins to change hearts,
yes.
and minds and hearts when it comes to the adoption of this. Claire, I'm going to conclude now. I'm fascinated to see what you're going to do with this in light of our conversation. Magic wand time. If I was to hand you a magic wand and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
I don't know if this is a magic wand thing or if I'm just trying to shape what I'm going to say into the magic wand thing, but I have got to add one comment on what you said before, or what I said before, which is the other thing which is super exciting for me, because this has also been my real driver for probably 25 years I've been working on this principle is how can we create new businesses whose goal, whose actual ambition is to address social and environmental challenges? Because if you can do that, then you're gradually adding more and more new interesting models into the system. A lot will fail, but some will succeed. And that for me is the most exciting future opportunity for reuse and for many other global challenges. Goodness, there are so many, but there are so many startups looking now at addressing environmental issues. I think that in the future, the Procters and Gambles of this world are going to gradually, their presence in our lives will diminish and they'll gradually get less important. And the startups that are flourishing now will flourish into important businesses that are doing the thing differently. So I see that as kind of, if you imagine these startups in different places, they're like little cogs and they're working together. And gradually, the more there are, the more cogs are going to be turning and the more society will be changing accordingly. And we're seeing so much of that already. I mean, I'm going to do a shout out for my favorite laundry company called Home Things. They supply laundry products, refillable, or they send you a pill and you put it in a bottle of water, or they send you laundry sheets. So you don't ever have to be transporting basically 99% water back from the supermarket to wash your clothes in a plastic bottle. So there are lots of companies that are doing really well, that are changing people's perspectives. And I don't know if that's a magic wand, but I think, that would be the thing I'd love to see. I've always been encouraging through my also academic times, which I still am slightly involved with, encouraging students to think about how are you going to make this work in the real world? Go out and do it. Let's make this actually a real thing.
Well, the way you were describing that there, it really resonated with what we're trying to do with TrueMark and how ultimately we're that little cog in that otherwise bigger picture around, improving standards of communication and trying to create a more trusting and transparent world. So it was great to hear that that's part of your vision for the future. Claire, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. I've had a great time talking to you and hope you've enjoyed it too.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, Charlie, as I knew it would be, because I always have fun conversations with you. But thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the chance to rant a little bit about my favourite topic. So it's been really good fun. And maybe we can do it again. Been really enjoyed this. I didn't think I would. I thought I'd be terrified and awful at it, but it's been fun. Thank you.
Claire, thanks again. And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big, big thank you to Clare Brass for joining me on today's show. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by TrueMark, the mark of trusted communications. Visit truemark.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.